So welcome again to the Festive Tech Calendar 2022. We are going to be showing a little bit of a solution integrating the whole Power Platform with the Power Apps, Power BI, Power Automate, and some Synapse in the background. So welcome again. Thanks for having me here. And let's go directly into our presentation today. So, first of all, the name of the session is Forecasting Solution with Power Platform and Synapse. My name is Gaston Cruz. I'm Director for Microsoft Center of Excellence in Slalom and also Microsoft MVP in the data platform world. This is a little bit about me. I've been working closely with different reporting layers like Excel, Power BI, Power Pivot, Power Query, and so on. And I also certified in Azure Data Engineer Stream. I've been also training a lot of people in terms of understanding the Microsoft stack and ecosystem as a certified trainer. And I'm also a Seattle Power BI user group leader with other folks. We continue trying to do monthly basis call with great speakers, with great kind of insights that allow us to learn a lot around and work within the Power BI layer. I'm also a member of the Microsoft Global Data Community Council and also an organizer of what we call a YouTube channel that is Azure in el Bar, that is kind of a little bit of, conversations between people working on technology for a long time, where we share knowledge, experience, projects, how we land in the IT world and so on, and a little bit of, what is our insights of what is coming in terms of roadmaps in the technology work. In personal stake, I love to play table tennis, piano, reading, and some amateur photography. That's a little bit about me. So let's switch and discuss a little bit of our solution today. So first of all, I would love to start with a little bit of context on our end in terms of what is going on today in the data platform spectrum, or what Microsoft called the intelligent data platform. Because we hear a lot around Synapse. Synapse is not just data warehousing, it's a whole suite in technologies around ingestion framework, data, pipelines, monitoring, governance. So Synapse is not just where we land data, is a lot of different technologies and even different programming language that lives together to make it happen as a whole data platform framework. We can connect Synapse with Cosmos DB, with Data Lake, with Azure SQL, with Data Factory, with machine learning. So there's a whole spectrum of connectivity between Synapse and all those streams. And even, of course, outside the Microsoft spectrum, we can connect via link services and ingest data from a bunch of different data sources from on-premises and also from cloud spectrum. We can connect Synapse with REST API or with different streams coming from web applications and custom solutions. The other stream that I would love to talk about is you can connect, of course, Synapse Analytics with our Power Platform. So it's pretty easy to connect and to integrate Synapse with Power BI. We can, even without the need of going outside Synapse, we can create our Power BI reports from the Synapse layer and push a new data set and push a new report directly to the Power BI services, even within the Synapse layer. It's pretty easy also to integrate Power Apps and Power Automate and virtual agents within with Synapse. So the whole Power Platform really lives with an easy to track and easy to speed and fast track connection between the Power Platform to the Synapse layer. It's also really easy to connect teams to Synapse, and having that spectrum of one framework, one single application that lives in our organization layer and that can connect with the backend of our data. The other stream, the other aspect that I would love to touch base is the easy track to connect Synapse with what we call data ops. So if you need to automate the process, work with multiple teams, multiple data engineers, data architects in one single solution, it's pretty easy to connect Synapse with DevOps and create pipelines, different branches, version control, connection with repositories, and so on. Also, it's easy to integrate for any programming language and do Visual Studio connection, Visual Studio Code, and use those frameworks to connect directly to Synapse. Azure monitoring, of course, if you want to have the logs and monitorings and audit all your framework, it's pretty easy to connect Azure Monitor to Synapse. And the last piece that I would love to touch base is the governance layer. We have Microsoft Purview at this point, where you can see all the data lineage and talking about compliance, policies, security, audit frameworks, and see in your backend of your solution, an end-to-end solution. If you think around one Power BI report, you can integrate Power BI with Purview, and Purview also with Synapse, and see the end-to-end solution between your landing your data into a landing zone and then doing multiple streams, and then the output to Power BI. You can see all the end-to-end solution using Microsoft Purview at this point. Going to our solution today. So main problem for this client, and this was kind of a real case scenario. The client was doing a bunch of cash flow and forecasting using Excel files, doing almost monthly basis, a lot of calculations, manual process, connecting with the different data sources and so on. So the creation process of the report was pretty tough for the client. The frequency was tough for them because they dedicate a lot of time to make it happen, almost a monthly basis. The usability of the report was pretty scary for people because the end user find that there's a bunch of different pages, different options to see in the report, and was kind of a little bit of tough to understand and to make decisions with this forecasting and cash flow solution. So it was pretty tough for the client to understand how this works, and was pretty tough to understand all those formulas and how to integrate the report and the flexibility of the report itself. So that was the scenario that we found when we land into this client. And as kind of a solution for this problem, we start thinking about different options to create a new report that could be in any different format with any different solution. So we come up with one idea that was, let's start thinking around one solution of the report on Power BI. Let's try to think about one option that where the client doesn't need to come up with refresh the report every month and need to recreate calculations or the reporting layer every time. So what we try to do here is find a way to create one Power BI template connecting to one data source in the backend and allow the client to have the flexibility to see what happens if they are thinking around investing on different campaigns or different artifacts or different assets. So the solution that we came up here was an integration between, of course, Power BI for the reporting layer, connecting to a data source, in this case, Synapse, and then coming up with a solution that allowed the end user, without going to another framework, to create a connectivity between the Power BI report and the data source. That was Power Apps, and I'm going to go further on that line explaining why Power Apps was in the middle of this framework. The other aspect for the client that was pretty important was the security and accessibility for the users. So Power BI and Power Apps, of course, they have native mobile applications, that was pretty easy and straightforward for the client to understand the process of just download the app and use the report directly from the mobile native app. No need to create another layer or another report only for mobiles. Let's go further on that line and explain a little bit of what was a trick in terms of understanding the Power BI framework. Because in Power BI, usually the users, when we create and use kind of start talking around the life cycle management on Power BI, the main deal is, okay, it's good because the default mode for create a data model is import, where you cache everything in memory and you connect to your data source or multiple data sources. You do the import, you cache in memory, and you get the result, because every time you are dealing with slicing of the data or showing a graph bar or column chart or a table or matrix, you show the results right away, because all the results are cached in the memory of your machine or your report. And you publish that to the service, and there's no constraint around performance. But in this case, you have multiple tables. You have dim dates, you have historical master view, you have different tables coming from the data source. In this case, the data source was Synapse. But what happens if you have one of those tables with millions of rows or billions of rows? So that is where you start kind of doing the tricky scenario. Okay, should I go with a storage mode in import and cache everything in memory? But what about if I need to cache in memory a whole fact table with millions of rows? What is going to happen is that the performance is not going to be great, because you're trying to cache everything in memory and you have millions of rows, and it's going to be tricky for your computer or from your service to load all the data right away, So in that case, you need to combine what we call different storage modes, saying, okay, the dim dates, for example, or the dimensions in my data model, I can hit in import way, because there's no billions of rows, it's just thousands of rows, so I can cache in memory. But then what happened with fact tables where I have millions of rows and I need to land them and get the source from them and going back and forth with the outcome? So you have this deal where you can come up with aggregations layer, and you can do some group bys and create some views, and then you can split those views in different layers. So some of those views, in my case, was the master view, where you can split those master views in a couple of them in import mode, because you can cache in memory, because if you got thousands of records, there's no issue there. But then if you go to the further line and you want to go to the details on that one, you can create a direct query connections, because that's where you need to go to the data source and come back with the results of your query. So you need to understand a little bit of your data model to understand, okay, if I have my star schema with dimensions, with fact tables, and you have different views, some of them with group by, some of them with aggregations, some of them not with aggregations, going to the details, you need to understand, okay, what is going to be the trade-in between storage mode, between import and data query, and create that kind of composite model in some way. This is a little bit of our report in Power BI. And if you notice this, all the reports is hitting all those tables that we comment before, some of them in import, and you see here in the number 1, 2, 3, 4, you have all the details around, okay, when we go import, and when you see the import here, that means that we are hitting the result cache in memory. We are caching in memory, and we are getting all the table cache in memory to get the result instantly. Then, if you see here, some of the tables, like this one, changes in cache current future, is hitting data query. Same with the table what if scenario, hitting data query. The latest refresh, data query, because we are going to the data source in the moment the user is getting this result or is asking for that answer. If the user is asking for that answer, that means that with that query, we are going to go to the data source and come back with the result. The other aspect that I want to share with you here is in the right of this screen, we have this picture that is what if scenario. What is this? This is a Power Apps that lives inside the Power BI report. These Power Apps allow the end user to create their own scenarios, and since this is a cash flow analysis, the end user can come up here and create multiple scenarios, and with those multiple scenarios, they can say, okay, what if I am thinking around an investment in a marketing campaign? So they can create that scenario to create a marketing campaign with some investment in Q2 or Q3 or Q4, and then they can see actually in the cash flow analysis how that marketing campaign is going to hit the cash flow analysis. Instead of doing the investment, they create the scenario. And even more around that, they can create the scenario and base that scenario in a private model. So maybe I am thinking around the marketing campaign, but I don't want anybody on my company that I'm working on that. So I can create the scenario and create a role level security statement where that scenario is going to be private, and that report and that scenario is going to be visible only on my end and not for anyone else on my company. So that being said, how we create the Power Apps and how the Power Apps is interacting with the backend on Synapse layer and the Power BI report. So that means that when the client is using the what if scenario, they are opening the Power Apps. That again, to explain this, the Power Apps lives inside the Power BI report. They create a new scenario. That scenario, when they hit the option of create a new scenario, that option of create a new scenario is triggering this new scenario screen where they define the name of the scenario. In my example was marketing campaign. They say, okay, in which company we are going to run that campaign or that investment, in which quarter we are going to run that investment, and the amount of that investment. And then the privacy. As I mentioned before, they can apply role level security and they can say, okay, I want this scenario to affect and to be visible to all the company, or this scenario is going to be visible only for me. When they save the scenario, that is going to trigger a Power Automate flow. And the Power Automate flow is going to trigger two different things. First, the Power Automate flow is going to run store procedures on the Synapse layer. And after updating the Synapse layer and all the tables that lives in the Synapse layer, that is the backend of our Power BI report, then after the refresh of my Synapse layer, it's going to get a result of that store procedures. And with that result, it's going to refresh the Power BI report. It's going to trigger the refresh on the Power BI report. So this is kind of a little bit of the process diagram for our end. And then if you see here, we have the Power Apps. The Power Apps is opening the report. So you can see that from the Power BI standpoint, we create the Power Apps. The Power Apps is triggering the execution of the store procedures. You can see all the store procedures here. This is a store procedure that is getting all the parameters, and after we finish this, we get a response saying, okay, this is the response that we finished, and we have the return code of the result for this store procedure. So this is something that behind the scenes, when you hit the save button on the Power Apps that lives in the Power BI report, is triggering all these store procedures that happens in the Synapse layer and is updating the Synapse layer, is coming up with the result of the return code for finish that process, and is refreshing the Power BI report. Let me show you exactly how this works in the real life. So going to Power BI, I'm showing right now in the Power BI side of things. This is the Power BI report. As I mentioned before, this is all Power BI connected to the Synapse layer. Let me do this. Let me edit this option here to show you that we have here the option to look at the report, and at the same time what I would love to show you is that this piece here in the report is a Power Apps. And if you, I just click here, and if you see this button here is the native button that allow us to connect the Power Apps and to embed the Power Apps inside the Power BI report. So as you can see, it's just a report in Power BI that, because that is kind of a UX, UI design, is getting the Power Apps connected directly to Power BI. So let's go further on this line, and let's go again to the reading view of the report. And as we can see, we have all the items. This is a cash flow analysis for Q2, Q3 in 2021, Q4, and 2022 you have Q1, Q2. If let's say that in Q2 of 2022, we are thinking to do an investment for a marketing campaign or something like that. Of course, I can go to marketing campaign, delete this one, because that was kind of me testing something, but I can test this one, and I can go and say, okay, what about if in this fiscal year I want to do an investment? I can hit in the plus option here, naming marketing campaign forecast, select the company that I'm going to be using for this example, in which quarter I'm going to think to do the investment, and let's say that I'm going to invest 750,000 on this one. And as you can see, I can select if I want this scenario to set to be private or no. So this is public, this is private, and only visible for my account. Is getting the scenario owner, picking up my email and my account logged in to Power BI. And when I hit save, remember what I mentioned before, when I hit save, this is triggering a Power Automate process that is going to trigger a store procedures to update the Synapse layer, and another store procedures to get the result of this execution and getting that parameter that allow me to refresh the Power BI report. That is kind of taking just a few seconds to do. So if you see here, this amount is gonna be showing in this quarter where I'm planning to do the investment. Let's save here, and you can see this amount is coming as marketing campaign forecast with this amount, and we can reflect that in our cash flow forecast for this quarter. So I can see the marketing campaign forecast with the result, and behind the scenes what is happening is going to the Synapse layer and then coming back to refresh. And that was almost automatic in terms of the refresh. This is a little bit of, what I would love to show today, to see how smooth it is to connect Synapse, Power BI, Power Apps, understanding a little bit of the storage modes in Power BI, and at the same time see that even for the end user is pretty smoothless the experience of handling a Power BI report, and at the same time executing a Power Apps within the report to do updates or to do forecasting in this case, and create scenarios for your end user. So hope that was great for everyone that joined today. And I'm gonna leave the all my details in terms of my Twitter account, my LinkedIn account. If you want to find the solution getting the sense for you, just connect with me and we can chat about it. Or if you have any questions further after you see this presentation, just ping me on Twitter or LinkedIn. A little bit of just kind of a source for this one. I want to kind of give a little bit of documentation to read about. You can jump into Microsoft Learn and see those collections, some learning path, introduction to Azure Synapse Analytics, build reports using Power BI with Azure Synapse Analytics, and the collection around Microsoft Power Platform. Those are really great resources from Microsoft Learn that you can jump in to understand a little bit of, more around Power Platform, Power BI, Power Apps, and how to connect all together with Synapse. So thanks to be here. Thanks to join me today. My name is Gaston Cruz again. I'm MVP in Data Platform, working as Director for Microsoft Center of Excellence within Slalom. And thank you very much to be here, and hope this solution provides insights for all of you. Thank you and have great holidays and Happy New Year.